Let's start that again.
Presenting Benny Goodman and his music.
Hey, everybody. Evening, Chris. Hey, Martin. Hey, David. Mail is getting closed. Hey, Heather. Hey, Susan. Hey, Karen and Bob. Hey, Gail, Amy, Luann, and Mary. Hey, Eric. Hey, Kathy. Hey, Crit. Hey, Mona. Carol, Eileen, Carol, and Karen, and Mindy, and Pam. They keep putting in like more than I see at a time. Hey, Deanna, Marcia, Nancy, Carol, Vicky, Betty, Betsy.
Blue Skies.
Hey, Jan. Hey, Jean. Hey, Joanne, Dina, Rob, Larry, Kathleen, Christine, and Jeff. Hey, Dory and John. Hey, Katie. Hey, Jeff. Katie, so hi to John. Hey, Zap. Hey, Laura. Hey, Don, Seta, Patty, Mike, Bridget, Nancy, Ann, Betsy, and Cindy. Hey, Kristen. Hey, Michelle. Hey, Trey over on YouTube. Hey, Julianne and Megan and Doreen. Hey, Vanya. Hey, Octavio. Hey, Han and Karina. Hey, Susie. Hey, Christy. Evening, June. Hey, Matt. Hey, Jody. Thanks, Betsy. They enjoyed meeting everybody, too. Beloved tour guide Adam Seltzer. Did they have the T on there, really? Okay. Whatever. Hey, Angie. Hey, Jacqueline. Hey, Ellen. It's Friday. Gotta get down on Friday. Hey, Aviva. Hey, Bob and Ginny and Lori. Hey, Aaron and Ryder. Hey, Lisa. Hey, Karen. I got Miles right down here in the chair next to me. Priya's right over by here, too. Hey, Cassie. Hey, Adam. Laura. Hey, Peter over there in Saigon. Hey, Maria. Welcome back. Hey, Ann. Hey, Heather. Hey, Sarah. I do know a place where we can get some whiskey punch. Why I'd want to drink such a thing, I haven't determined yet. I've never had, it's like milk-based whiskey drinks. I don't know. Hey, Kelly. Hey, back, Bucky. Hey, Andrea. Hey, Maria. Hey, Patty. Hey, Candy. Hey, June. Hey, all around. Hey, April. Hey, Karen and Jennifer. Hey, Susan. Hey, Mary Jo. Hey, Steve and Dana.
Benny Goodman presents Helen Ward singing With All My Heart.
I hope you can leave the hospital tomorrow too, Dana. Hey, Teresa over on Twitch. Mona, no, I won't be anywhere near here tomorrow. I'll be on the road for Find a Grave Friday. Hey, Heidi in Buena Park. Hey, Tracy and Peter. Hey, Mary in Nashville. Christine, the cats are getting along pretty well. I think Priya kind of drives Miles nuts with her kitten energy and wanting to play with all of his toys. But they sit together a lot. They chase each other and play a lot. Hey, Ryan on YouTube. Hey, Emily and Amy and Timberly. Hey, Lisa. With all my heart, I say I love you dearly. Hey, Chuck and Ann and Marcelina and Diane. All my heart. For all I'll ever care for, with all my heart. Evening all around, everybody. Hey, Gina. Hey, did I say hi to you already, Kristen? If not, hi. Hey, Sandy. Hey, Alexandra and Amy. Hey, Heidi. Yeah, I decided I don't really care about getting the dings on YouTube over the Benny. I'm not making it. It just means I can't monetize it on YouTube, and I don't make money off of the YouTubes anyway, so. Hey, Sarah.
Benny Goodman goes way back and gets a lot of rhythm out of Walk, Jenny, Walk. Benny Goodman.
I got this water here called Liquid Death. It murders your thirst. It's got this whole story about teenagers going into the woods with plastic bottles and having their thirst murdered. Do these guys know how to market to me or what? Hey, Dad. Laura, I haven't had time for Con Let Down. A special magazine about about Jack the Ripper that mentions me. That worries me slightly. Hey, Donna. Hey, Deb. Hey, Diane and Kristen. Yeah, if they're talking about Ripper suspects, I didn't do it. Nobody saw me do it. You can't prove anything. The hell of it is, it's just water. It's just, sparkling water. There's no caffeine in it or anything. But as canned water goes, it's fine. Mary, I'm familiar with the Peshtigo fire, but it's out of my jurisdiction, being like 200-300 miles away from here. Hey, Pepper. Hey, Megan and Patricia. There are actually quite a few more fires that day. There was one in Hyde Park that got put out pretty quickly. There was one in the Northwest Prairie that got put out pretty quickly. Hey, Audrey. Hey, Dean. Hey, Bob. And Bob. Thanks, Bob. Hey, Joanne. Hey, Sheena. Hey, Robert over on YouTube. Hey, Shelly in Kansas City. We'll give Benny Goodman one more time.
And they all loved it. They all loved those passions when they played by Benny Goodman. And now another
hey, welcome, Joanne.
Rosetta.
I'm drinking some Jepson's bourbon tonight. Hey, Katie. Is there a cocktail called Chicago Fire? Probably several of them. I'm gonna guess it involves like one of those Fireball whiskeys. Hey, Dorothy. Hey, Grandma Belle. I'm gonna let Benny Goodman finish out this song, then we'll get going. I got a lot of material in this one. I might go over my usual time limit. Hey, MJ. I know most of you don't mind if I go over time by any means. But I find that with any, no matter how good a virtual presentation is, I feel like 40 minutes is about the correct time for them. Hey, Rich. Ah, thanks, Sarah. Hey, Jordana. No, you are right on time. We're just letting Benny Goodman finish up here. Once he finishes this song, but so many people come on right at 8 o'clock, you know. All right, Benny Goodman, ladies and gentlemen, live from the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago. On the spot stood a house that was owned by Mary Wilmart that somehow survived the Great Chicago Fire until the hotel people bought it up to tear it down. So, welcome along, everybody. Welcome to another evening of Mysterious Chicago. I'm Adam Seltzer from Mysterious Chicago Tours. I've been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for over 15 years now. I've got about a dozen Chicago history books out, including Mysterious Chicago, the book, Ghosts of Chicago, now a rare edition, H.H. Holmes' The True History of the White City Devil, and coming next summer, Graceland Cemetery, Chicago Stories, Symbols, and Secrets from University of Illinois Press. So, lots of stuff to talk about. I'm on the History Channel and the Travel Channel all the time. I was just quoted on Twitter by the Chicago Timeline feed, so I am, after all, incredibly famous, and you should definitely pay attention to whatever I say. Now, a regular Thursday happens to fall on the day before the 150th anniversary of the Great Chicago Fire, which is coming up tomorrow. Really late tomorrow night. If we wanted to mark the exact time, we'd have to stay up pretty late. It started in the middle of the night, but really things had been building towards a big fire like that for a while. Just before I got started, I ran across this Book of Chicago Fire Reminisces, a poem. Blackened and bleeding, helpless, panting prone, on the charred fragments of her shattered throne, lies she who stood but yesterday alone, Queen of the West, by some enchanter taught to lift the glory of Aladdin's court, then lose the spell that all wonder wrought. Little bit of a forced rhyme there, Bret Hart. Pretty sure that's not Bret the Hitman Hart, but it says Bret Hart, it might be. But all right, so we're going to start out a little bit with a guy who had his 150th anniversary of his death yesterday. I've got a couple of buttons open here that shouldn't be. So October 6th of 1871, the wealthy Chicago merchant Barton Edsall was found lying dead in the entryway of his North Side mansion. For a couple of days, all anybody could really talk about was how did Barton Edsall really die? Was it a murder? Was it a suicide? Did he accidentally shoot himself in the head? Theories abounded. There wasn't a whole lot to go around, but there wasn't a whole lot of evidence left. I mean, they still had where the bullet holes were. They had the bullets. They had the angle of the bullets. They had the angles of the shots. All the things that could have made this a pretty easy case at the time. But at the time, it was still shrouded in mystery. It was something that kept people occupied until the next day. Well, 2 days really, but they got a little bit distracted on the evening of October 7th. For one thing, on October 7th, this is a picture of the old version of Farwell Hall designed by W.W. Boyington, the same guy who did the Water Tower, same guy who did the Rose Hill Cemetery gates. Now, this is a version that actually burned down in 1867. I couldn't find a good shot of the version that stood at the time of the Great Chicago Fire, but through its various incarnations, it was a popular gathering place and a popular meeting hall in Chicago. I even found setlist.fm actually has an entry for Farwell Hall showing the Fisk Jubilee Singers set list of April 24th, 1875. Notice that nobody knows what they actually sang that night. That's going to haunt me later on. But October 7th of 1871, a guy made a speech here named George Francis Train. He is thought to be the inspiration for Phineas Fogg, the main character in Around the World in 80 Days. He was a speaker who mostly talked about himself, though he also got into a lot of political phrase. In some areas, he was way ahead of his time. He believed in global warming. He believed in feminism, though he believed in global warming because he thought it was going to make him money. He believed in feminism, but when he went to speak, he mostly talked about himself. There was a time that he shared a bill speaking with Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony. The next day, the newspaper said that Cady and Stanton spoke about women's suffrage. George Francis Train spoke of George Francis Train. Now, some of his ideas were way ahead of their times. Others were way, way back. During the 1860s elections, he would make speeches saying, even my black friends are against abolitionism. Now, it was you get the idea reading his speeches that he might have been a really exciting guy to see if you saw him on just the right day. He probably seemed really exciting, had a lot of innovative ideas, but then after he started talking too long, you'd realize that the guy was kind of a nut and kind of a bigot. He was like Morrissey in a lot of ways, I guess. So October 7th of 1871, he made this speech at Farwell Hall. There were advertisements in the paper. So this one, George Francis Train will deliver his lecture tonight in Farwell Hall. Then we move this up a little bit. Treason! It has been ascertained that George Francis Train will seek to influence the minds of the people tonight. Loyal citizens are notified to be vigilant. Now, this was part of a kickoff for his campaign for the presidency in 1872 as an independent candidate. Later, he would put out a book of his speeches called The Man of Destiny, which I think tells you all you need to know about George Francis Train. The Chicago speech was not recorded, but a couple of weeks later, it was reported that he had stopped in the middle of the speech and said, "Something terrible is going to happen. This is the last speech that will ever be given in this hall. I can't say anything else. I dare not say more, but a great calamity is coming and no speech will ever be given in this hall again." Then resumed his usual speech. Now, prophesizing the destruction of Chicago was part of his regular act. He was always saying that the polar ice caps were going to melt, Lake Michigan would rise up, and Chicago would be flooded. It was not coincidental that he had a lot of real estate holdings in Omaha. He was really promoting Omaha as the real big city of the Midwest. It was just a part of his act. Later on, somebody asked him, "Did you really prophesy the burning of Chicago?" And he kind of looked aside, like, "Who can explain this strange power I seem to have?" Colossal dork, but whether he actually made that speech or not, said that in the speech or not, is not really known. It was reported a couple of weeks later. By then, it was easy to have made that kind of claim. It wasn't the way he normally claimed Chicago would be destroyed. But we'll move on a little bit. We'll cover him. We'll come back to George Francis Train, because at the time that he was speaking, there was already a fire blazing. Right over here in the West Division, right about where the Sears Tower stands right now, in fact. Over here, there was a fire that broke out on October 7th and ended up burning a couple of blocks. Now, this was huge. There was talk of crowds of tens of thousands of people gathering to watch this fire. It was said to be the worst fire that Chicago had had in probably 10 or 15 years, possibly going back to the large fire on 1857 over on Wacker. Eventually, the Adams Street Bridge even burned up. So, this is what the headline said the next day. Fire, terrible conflagration in the city last night. A large lumber district devastated by flame. A scene of unparalleled grandeur and magnificence. Fearful ravages of the fire demon among the fuel. The firemen powerless to check its progress. Now here's the problem. You got this whole area that was burning up. A lot of lumber yards, a lot of tenement houses, and a lot of fuel storage places. Now, the firemen could only do so much about this, but they used up most of the resources that they had and most of the energy they had. So by the time October 8th came around, they were out of resources and out of energy. So October 8th dawned. This was an ad in the Chicago Tribune on the morning of October 8th, 1871, for fire insurance. Fire, fire, prepare for fall and winter fires. Disastrous conflagration in the West Division last night. Insure in companies of known reliability. 1864 to 1871. That's an old company. 7 years. Old and sound. Mutual Insurance Company. Fire and Marine. Now, there were quite a few ads like this going around because it had been a very dry summer. Everybody knew the conditions were right for a really big fire. They'd only had like a couple of inches of rain in the last months. So, October 8th, Barton Edsall is buried in his small plot at Graceland Cemetery that we saw a minute ago. Newspapers don't take the opportunity to give a review of George Francis Train's speech. Normally after he made a speech, they'd make fun of him a bit the next day. For some reason, there's no report from the next day on what he actually said that night. But late that night, move down to over here. Move down a little bit south and a little bit west of where we just were, where the West Division fire was on October 7th. And right here, where the Firemen's Training Academy is now, was the home of Patrick and Catherine O'Leary, which looked about like this. It was just a little house with a barn out behind it, but at some point over the course of the night, a fire broke out in that barn. And as we'll see later, there were lots of different theories about how the fire started. Catherine O'Leary, Mrs. O'Leary herself, was in bed at the time. She was quickly exonerated from it. Nobody really knows how the fire started. It could have been something as simple as just a lightning strike. And the important thing is, it really should have been just a regular old barn fire, the kind of thing that happened just about every day. But partly it was windy that day. Partly it had been drought for a long time. And partly, as we've seen before, the day before, all of the fire department had used up their resources. So by the time they got out to the old O'Leary cottage at Jefferson and DeKoven, there wasn't a whole lot that they could do. Now, the wind started blowing the fire around to other buildings, and then eventually it crossed over the river. Once it crossed over the river and started burning things on the other side of the Chicago River into the central business district, things started to get a lot more scary for people. So we're going to cover the story of Lambert Tree, most particularly here. This is the monument of G.M. Stevens at Graceland Cemetery. Originally, this was the monument of H.H. McGee. But McGee's son-in-law, Judge Lambert Tree, had everybody hauled out of the place and sold it off to a lawyer. They're now buried up by the pond. This is Judge Lambert Tree himself. When he saw that the fire had jumped over across the river, and at the time, you could see smoke from all over the city. You could see the flames rising up from all over the downtown area. Late at night, about roughly midnight, he went running towards his office, which stood at LaSalle and Clark, LaSalle and Randolph, to try to rescue anything that he could. Try to find any valuables, try to find any important papers, whatever he could haul away. But even as he was in his office right here at Randolph and LaSalle, he could look across the corner where City Hall is now, and see the courthouse starting to go up in flames. Now, the courthouse that we had at the time looked like this, and it survived the fire more or less. They were able to still use it, especially the jail portion of it for a while, but in the middle, the cupola, in the middle of it, a lot of people later remarked about what that looked like when it was on fire. Eventually, it came crashing down into the building, and a lot of people kind of looked at it and thought, it's kind of beautiful, isn't it? That was something that they had to stop and say to themselves. They would kind of turn and say, I don't want to be strange, but there's a certain beauty to this. There's something very sublime about the whole thing. And it kind of reminds me, I remember I was in a chat room the morning of 9/11, and eventually one guy said, listen, I just have to say it, if this were a movie, this would be pretty cool. I keep expecting the Fantastic Four to show up. And I suppose we could go into any number of psychological things about why our brains do things like this. But by the time Judge Lambert Tree was getting away from his office right here in the heart of the Loop and starting to go up to River North where he lived, the bridges were starting to look like this. There were only so many ways to get out of town at the time. Some people were able to take a bridge over into the West Division. These guys are heading north up into the North Division as the flames keep on crawling further and further up. The traffic jams in some cases got quite a bit worse than this. And one thing that almost everybody remarked on was they just saw so many strange things. Now, a lot of people didn't really talk about the horrors that they had seen. They talked about things that were strange. They talked about looting going on with nobody even seeming to care. They talked about a drunk standing up on a piano to shout, "The fire is the poor man's friend," as he drank liquor that he had just looted from a place until somebody hit him in the head with a bottle. They saw people acting out scenes. They saw people patting each other on the back. People just walked along in kind of good humor for all of this. Now, Lambert Tree himself was able to make his way up to his father-in-law, H.H. McGee's house, the guy whose tomb he would eventually sell out from under him, which stood right here where Tree Studios would eventually be built. This is an artist colony that was built by Judge Lambert Tree, currently on State Street. Still standing. It's mostly retail shops now. But at the time, there was just the house of a H.H. McGee, who was a dry goods merchant, which was surrounded by a very large yard. So a lot of people congregated in this place, bringing all of their valuables with them. This is one thing that you have account after account of, is people trying to haul paintings, toys, collectibles, keepsakes, jewelry, of course, beds, furniture, whatever they could possibly haul, they were trying to take with them. When they got up to H.H. McGee's house, H.H. McGee and his wife were just letting everybody in, so they figured, we have a big enough yard. The house won't burn. There will be no way for the fire to get all the way to the house, and this yard will be a safe place for everybody to stash their things. Lambert Tree was able to bury some of his silverware, which he eventually got back, but nothing else that he carried was ever seen again. So they all huddled in this house for as long as they could until the flames started getting closer and closer, at which point they managed to break out of the house, bust through the fence, and make their way up across Chicago Avenue to where the waterworks are. This is the water tower that at the time was just a few years old. Now, the reason we have this water tower is really it's a pumping station. A few years before this, people had realized, maybe one of the reasons we keep having these cholera epidemics is we're drinking such disgusting water from the lake. Maybe if we got water from further out in the lake where it's not quite so polluted, maybe that will help. And in fact, it did help. So they dug this mile-long tunnel that went out into the lake and got clearer water. And the pump thing was to pump that water down the mile-long tunnel. Now, we had a lot of tunnels in Chicago. We've always had a thing about digging tunnels in Chicago. In fact, Tree was able to get over the State Street Bridge. Other people were evacuating via the tunnel that went underneath the river on LaSalle Street. This is a drawing from when it was first being built a couple of years before, and people had developed a weird sort of camaraderie as they made their way into this. Everybody put their hands on the shoulders of the person in front of them and chanted, "Stay to the right, stay to the right, stay to the right," as they marched their way through the tunnel. And there were even people later on who says, looking back, it's almost pleasant to remember. Now, once they got up to here, Judge Lambert Tree managed to arrange for somebody to drive them. He found a wagon that was willing for a certain price to take people further away. There are stories about people offering hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a ride in a wagon. But he met up with a family called the Butterfields. The youngest kid of the group was a kid named Justin Butterfield. This is a drawing that he made of his family escaping the fire. It's remarkable that this survives. Really, children's drawings from the 19th century are remarkably rare to begin with. There are very few of them that really survive. But there it is. You can see his whole family carrying away all of their stuff. He's labeled me, and he's going along carrying his pet goat. And Lambert Tree mentioned this in his mentioned this in his reminiscences of this later on. He mentioned a lot of pets. He mentioned that there was a little girl trying to keep a pet canary safe unsuccessfully. And he seemed to have been more affected by the death of the canary than he was from the death that he witnessed, which weren't very many. He saw one old woman who had been carried out on a mattress, was laid out and died in the middle of the night. And he said it was regarded very casually. We all sort of assumed that lots and lots of people were going to die. And just like it does in wartime, we just got used to it very, very quickly. But other people noted that they didn't see a whole lot of deaths. There's one thing kind of in common with a lot of the witnesses is that for all the things they saw, they didn't see a lot of dead bodies. When Lambert Tree went back into the business district a couple of days later, he only saw one dead body. And really, the estimate for how many people were killed in this tends to hover in the 190 to 300 range. It's generally guessed that might be on the low end. I think it might actually be on the high end. So, thing about this fire is just about everybody had ample advance notice. It's not like the fire snuck up on people. They knew that it was getting closer and closer. Everybody had a chance to escape. Now, of course, there were people who were too old or too feeble or had mobility issues who had a bit of a harder time. But for the most part, people had ample warning. People had ways to get out of the way. And recently there was a children's book by Sally Walker called Fiery Night, A Boy, His Goat, and the Great Chicago Fire. I was on a panel with Sally a couple of times some years back, I think. But eventually, people started making their way up to Lincoln Park, which was the old city cemetery. And it's one thing that's almost comical when you read these accounts is people would get about 2 blocks north and then stop and think, okay, now we're safe. And then the fire would catch up, so they'd go another 2 blocks and think, okay, now we're safe. But eventually they made their way up to Lincoln Park, where eventually a rain began to fall, but not before things had gotten disturbing there. There's an account of what it was like in City Cemetery that night. It's worth reading in full. This region over by the lake and the great Lincoln Park seemed to offer safety. So great a rush was made for the park, and the refugees made themselves comfortable in the delusion of security. After ravaging the limits of the city, with the wind dead against it, the fire caught the dried grasses running along the fences, and in a moment covered the burning glory of the Catholic cemetery, and the grassy stretches of the great park. The marbles over the graves cracked and baked and fell in glowing embers on the hot turf. Flames shot up from the resting places of the dead, and the living fugitives, screaming with horror, made for a moment the ghastliest spectacle that ever fell upon living eyes. The receiving vault, solidly built and shrouded in foliage, fell under the terrific flame, and the dead burst from their coffins as the fire tore through the walls of the frightful charnel house. In the broad light of today, the place is the most ghastly I ever saw, not even Cold Harbor exceeding it in awful suggestiveness. Now, this is one account that was written to a newspaper. There are several other accounts of the time in the park, and none of them said it was a real party there or anything. Everybody was concerned about their health. They were trying to get food. They were worried about they were worried about whatever else they were worrying about 3 hours before the fire began. Like, here is the page from Graceland Cemetery's interment book. This is the list of all the burials and causes of death from the days around the Great Chicago Fire. You can see at the top, the 6 at the top there represents October 6th. The second one there is accidental. That's Barton Edsall, who we mentioned before. But then the days of the fire and the days following, debility, typhoid fever, consumption, dropsy of the heart, cholera infantum, which is now thought to be misdiagnosed malaria, convulsions, cancer, cholera infantum. All of the usual diseases just continued to kill people at the time. And in fact, it was later reported that in Lincoln Park that night, as people hid out waiting for shelter and waiting for aid to arrive, there were 5 deaths and 8 births in the 24 hours there. I'm not sure that's ever quite been verified. But Lambert Tree and his family were all safe. I believe Justin and his goat were safe as well. So here's a couple of stories of some assorted people. Joseph Henry Hudlin. I've talked about him many times. I love this guy's story. There's a few conflicting accounts of exactly how he escaped from enslavement down south. The simplest is that one day he snuck out onto a riverboat ship, put on a chef's hat, and pretended he worked there until they got to Illinois, at which point he made his way to Chicago and got a job in the Board of Trade. During the Great Chicago Fire, he was able to personally rescue an awful lot of important records from the Board of Trade. He worked there for about 45 years. Bit of a mystery, we don't know what Mary Lincoln was doing that night. She was living with Robert, her son, in Chicago. Robert went back to his office to try to save valuable papers like old letters and keepsakes from his father, Abraham Lincoln. By the time he got there, it was too late. He had to turn back and go to the house. And their house survived the fire. It was only about a block away from the burnt district, but that ended up surviving. What we don't know is if Mary and Robert stayed in the house and took their chances, or if they made their way out to the lake for safety. It's strange to me that nobody's really got a good narrative of what happened to Mary and Robert Lincoln during the fire that night. Then there's William Bross. William Bross was the founder of a Chicago newspaper, active in politics for many years. This is his grave up at Rose Hill Cemetery. He looked about like this. Now, he ran to the newspaper offices when everything started to burn and thought that they could still save things. They tried to requisition some dynamite to blow up buildings so that the fire wouldn't have a new place to catch on. When they couldn't find any dynamite, he instead managed to get some axes. And he and several other people went around to all of the buildings they could find that were anywhere near the newspaper offices, all of the wooden frame buildings, and just started hacking at them themselves. But then they saw the fire getting closer and closer and realized that it was absolutely useless. And like everybody else, Bross just went and tried to load up his wagons with all of the stuff that he could possibly carry. Now, trouble is, he came up to a guy, and a guy came up to him and said, "Hey, I know who you are. You're William Bross. Tell you what, leave your stuff with me, and I'll take care of it for you." It was the oldest one in the book, and he fell for it. But generally, those stories seem to have been the exception rather than the rule. We'll also move up here to Graceland Cemetery, and I'll zip up here a little. It's kind of a longer video bit. But there are these underground crypts, or crypts that go into hills where the coyotes especially like to hang out. And this is the tomb of Horace White, who would later become the editor of the Chicago Tribune. Now, he was among the people who was probably helping with the axes outside, but then when it became clear that the whole loop was going to burn, he ran back to his house. They managed to load up 7 or 8 wagons full of stuff, and in fact, we even decided that the stuff is even... the traffic is good enough. It looks like we're going to be clear. You can go back and get another load. So he went back and got his prized pet parrot. He had a green parrot that he described as very talented. I wish I could find more anecdotes about the parrot. But one thing that he noted was that everybody seemed to be getting along. The rich people helped the poor people helped the rich people, because they had to figure we're all the poor people now. As far as anybody knew, a lot of people figured there's no way the insurance companies are ever going to be able to cover this. All of my money is in cash and it's all going to burn up now. My house is gone. My stuff is gone. Everything is gone. But even then, people seemed like they were able to say, well, at least we're able to survive. Everybody kind of had a can-do attitude, except for a couple of holdouts. There were a few people talking about looting. There were a few people saying Chicago will never be rebuilt. We ought to get to Cincinnati on the next train. We have no customers here. There's no work to do here now. There's no money here. It's all New York and Cincinnati from here on out. But there were a lot of stories that went around in the next few days, especially in other cities, saying that there had been an awful lot of lynching going on. Anytime somebody was caught looting, or there were a lot of rumors that people were caught setting fires themselves to try to make things worse, and stories went around that these guys were captured and killed. These still go around sometimes. They say you saw people hanging from every lamppost. Eyewitness accounts refute all of this. In fact, Horace White took particular exception to it, saying that with a couple of holdouts of people being profane, and quite a few people being drunk, all I saw was people trying to help each other out. But of course, not everybody had a happy ending, though there's only a very small number of marked graves of Great Chicago fire victims, really a remarkably small number. One of them that we saw on the morning mini tour today is a guy named Jacob Wolfe, who had been in the Civil War with, I believe, a Pennsylvania regiment, and was in his house on Harrison Street when the fire came through. And it's a little bit undistinct there, but after the line that says, born in 1822, burned in the Chicago fire, October 9th, 1871. It would have been probably very early in the morning of October the 9th. And one of the earlier deaths, one of the first to be reported, was a guy named Horace Dewey. Now, Horace Dewey was in an office building at the time. He was in a 3-story building and tried to jump onto the roof of a 2nd-story building that was next door, but didn't make it. There's only a couple of marked graves. These are the only two that I've found. I've heard rumors of a couple of other ones, but I've never been able to find them myself. A great many of the people who did die, whose bodies were recovered, many of them couldn't be identified, and many of them were buried at Dunning Cemetery, which was our new Potter's Field at the time, a place where unclaimed bodies were buried. It's also where people who died in the tuberculosis hospital, from the orphanage. Now, the city forgot that it was there for several decades until they started digging to put in luxury housing up around here, about at Irving and Narragansett. But quite a number of prominent Chicagoans were not even in Chicago at the time, and this made things especially stressful for them. They were hearing vague reports that all of Chicago was burned up. Imagine this: you're in another city, and you find out that your whole city, including your home, your business, possibly your family, is in that city. So Potter Palmer quick sent word, so Potter Palmer was okay. I have particulars of fire and perfectly reconciled to our losses. We shall not be embarrassed. Have an abundance left. Be cheerful and do all possible for sufferers. Will return by first train after funeral. Potter was away for a funeral. It kind of seems like a frivolous thing to know, well, Potter Palmer's okay, so that's good, isn't it? Isn't that important? But, he had a good message. Be cheerful and do all possible for sufferers. Meanwhile, over, I think in France, was Julia Newberry. Her father, Walter Newberry, had died at sea a couple of years earlier. There's a great urban legend about him being buried in a barrel of rum. Julia kept a diary that was eventually published in the 1930s. It's particularly affecting reading how she had gotten the news. First, they started hearing these rumors that there was some calamity in Chicago. Then they heard that lots of Chicago had burned. And finally did get confirmation that their entire house and everything in it, their father's letters back and forth between him and Aaron Burr, all of her old dolls, she particularly mentioned those, had all been burned down to nothing. It's a very effective scene in her diary. Very affecting. But in the rubble of the next couple of days, Chicago was always known for its can-do spirit. Here's what things looked like. After a couple of days of burning, when the fire finally stopped, just kind of scroll through here. You can see a handful of buildings did survive. The courthouse, they were able to still use the jail portion for a while. Just kind of go this in silence and kind of a moment of silence for the victims. Right here, I believe that's the top of St. James Church that is still there now. I'm going to get ahead of myself a little bit. Now, out at Rose Hill Cemetery is the grave of a guy named Conrad Collar, with a statue of his son who died at the age of 8. Now, Conrad Collar was in charge of, worked for the Chicago Tribune as a printer. He was given the task of going out to the west side of the city where a couple of printing offices were and paying whatever he could to get a hold of the printing presses. All of the newspapers wanted to get back out as soon as they possibly could. And in fact, on October 9th, the Chicago Journal was able to rush something out. Chicago Evening Journal. While the flame was still going on, the great calamity of the age, Chicago in ashes. Now, the Tribune ended up sharing an office with the Journal. They shared a makeshift office after their original ones were both burned. The Chicago Tribune came out a couple of days later on October 11th, including things like the death of Horace Dewey. 80,000 people burned out. The death of Jacob Wolfe was mentioned here, too. Over 100 dead bodies recovered from the debris, tens of thousands of citizens without food, 18,000 buildings destroyed. That's a little lower estimate than we normally hear now. We tend to hear it was 16,000 now. The Chicago Times, for their part, you all know what I think of the Chicago Times. As soon as they reopened, the Chicago Times started ripping on them. A dreadfully dilapidated old concern known as the Evening Journal claims some merit in having gone through the process of revivification after the fire and wishes the Times to acknowledge as much. The Times is a truthful journal and can't do it. We absolutely failed to discern any merit in the recitation of so imbecilic an institution. The Tribune of this city, occupying a large portion of its space and reprinting a complimentary notes from outside enterprises under obligations to it, the Tribune is right, for it has never been in so much need of puffs from abroad as now, when it don't and can't get any at home. What a bunch of jerks these guys were. And in the days that followed, a lot of people were trying to find their lost property. This is an ad from October 14th, 6 days later. Taken from the rear during the fire, a spring wagon nearly new, body painted green. 2 stray cows, one very dark red with long horns, the other white and red speckled with a white belly and has short horns. $25 reward for the return of a plain Chickering piano, Boston make, taken from 239 LaSalle Street, together with full load of furniture. $25 reward for one small trunk left in LaSalle Street. $100 reward for 2 trunks covered in black new canvas and large black satchel marked C.S. Waller and Mrs. C.S. Waller. Meanwhile, the first people back on the scene, back at work on the scene, were the newsboys, the people who were selling these newspapers that were being printed up. One of the survivors said that the first person he saw doing business otherwise was an old woman who came in with an apple cart. That was the beginning of Chicago coming back up, which everybody knew. After a couple of days, people got their heads together and said, well, all we can really do now is build up. So the Chicago Tribune, in their first issue back, said, cheer up. In the midst of a calamity without parallel in the world's history, looking upon the ashes of 30 years' accumulations, the people of this once beautiful city have resolved that Chicago will rise again. Now, right near Mr. Holbert, the founder of the National League, I just kind of happened to stumble the other day onto the grave of William D. Kerfoot. William D. Kerfoot became famous in the days after the Great Chicago Fire. He was a realtor who immediately built himself a clapboard real estate office. On it, you can't really see the sign in this version of it, but it says, William D. Kerfoot is at 59 Union Park, all gone but wife, children, and energy. It's an artist rendering of it. This became kind of famous. I'm pretty sure that's just a copied picture of General Grant down at the bottom next to the guy in the top hat. But you can see the sign on the side there, William Kerfoot, all gone but wife, children, and energy. He even put this in his classified ads. William Kerfoot, real estate agent, 36 Canal Street, all gone but wife, children, and energy. And meanwhile, and this video is sped up a little bit. This is a bit of a hike. We'll let it go. Now, it was suddenly said that just about everybody was doing a brisk trade in relics. You couldn't walk down the street without kids trying to sell you relics of the Great Chicago Fire for a while there. The big prize was the bell from the courthouse. Originally, it was bought by Thomas Barber Bryan, the founder of Graceland Cemetery, who was a serious collector of oddities and trinkets and memorabilia. But he couldn't think of anything to do with it, so he ended up selling it to this teenage kid named Henry S. Everhart, who melted it down and made it into souvenir bells, souvenirs of the Great Chicago Fire. It's a picture of the courthouse bell in ruins. He was able to make, I think he estimated like 200,000 miniature souvenir bells. Which at the time, he kind of glutted the market on them. Eventually, they were giving them away with as premiums with candy boxes. But they're awfully rare on the collector's market now. But of course, there was an ugly side of the reporting that came next. For one thing, back at Mount Olivet Cemetery, where I got to meet some of you fine people last Friday, right up at the front of it is the grave of Patrick and Catherine O'Leary, and their son James O'Leary. Now, it was in their barn that the fire started, and almost immediately there were rumors that it had started because of a cow kicking over a lantern. Then in the Chicago Times eventually came up with this whole story about Mrs. O'Leary, referred to her as an old Irish woman said that she was about 70 years of age, which is twice his age as he actually was, and their story was that she had deliberately burned down the city because they were cutting off her pension. She did not actually get a pension, she wasn't anywhere near that old, but they said that she just sat there saying, my poor cow, she is gone and I have nothing left in the world. Now, Mrs. O'Leary was actually cleared almost immediately. We issued a formal apology to her, a formal exoneration in 1997, but really we had already formally exonerated her a long time before. But even though Chicagoans knew it wasn't her fault, people kept on blaming her for it, and somebody even claims that they had bought the cow to serve up as oxtail soup on Thanksgiving. Now, exactly what really started the fire is not known. There are stories about kids sneaking into the barn to steal milk from the cow to make whiskey punch. There's a guy the first guy to report the fire was a guy named Pegleg Sullivan, whose story about where he had been that night did not exactly add up. And it could have just been something like a lightning strike, too. Again, it should have been just a regular barn fire, the kind of thing that happened every day. Mrs. O'Leary's son, James, claimed that it was green hay in the hayloft spontaneously combusting, which is something the green hay is known to do. Now, Big Jim himself, he grew up to be Big Jim O'Leary, a gambling kingpin, whose mansion is still standing and currently for sale. Quite a number of people have tried to get me into this place, but so far they're not doing it. They've been advertising it like it's Mrs. O'Leary's own mansion. She was dead for 5 years by the time it was built. But up at the top there's this face carved into the wall, which is sometimes presumed to be a portrait of Mrs. O'Leary. If that's true, this is the only known portrait of Mrs. O'Leary. She refused to sit for portraits. She refused even to sit for somebody to draw a picture of her. It is said that this is a revenge on reporters, because reporters were the ones who made up the story about her. It was generally said that you did not mention this sort of thing in front of Big Jim O'Leary if you valued your life. And of course, one of the other stories that goes around quite a lot is that a meteor had started the fire. It's sometimes said, there were lots of other scattered fires around. There was a fire in Hyde Park that burned for a minute before they blew it up, before it was put out. There was a fire in the Northwest Prairie near Graceland Cemetery, but was quickly put out. And of course, in Peshtigo, Wisconsin, a couple hundred miles to the north, there was a huge fire that did even more destruction and killed about 3,000 people, about 10 times as many as this one. The story that it was a meteor, though, started with a book called Ragnarok, The Age of Fire and Gravel by Ignatius Donnelly, who also claimed that a previous meteor had wiped out the continent of Atlantis. It's a pretty interesting read. You can find it on Google Books. It's not exactly convincing, but it's pretty interesting. And I don't know if it came up on the History Channel or what, but the meteor theory got very popular a while back, despite the fact that I've yet to meet a scientist who thinks it's plausible. But just a few days after they blamed Mrs. O'Leary, the Chicago Times ran this article, a startling story, that first reiterated that George Francis Train had predicted the fire by saying, "I can't say what's going to happen. I dare not." The implication was that he knew all along that the city was about to be burned deliberately by the Société Internationale, which was a real organization, but existed mainly in the minds of paranoid people. Anytime something bad happened, people thought that maybe it was the Société Internationale doing it. It was kind of the 19th century equivalent of Antifa, really. This was a long and completely unconvincing anonymous story, but a lot of people did believe that maybe something sinister was going on. And there was particularly, in the days after the fire, a lot of worry that communists and anarchists were going to come and try to start more fires and make things worse. Now, though the fire wrecked the city, there are plenty of relics still surviving today. Of course, the most famous of those is the water tower, which survives just fine. And just a couple of blocks away from that is the old St. James Church. And if you look up at the top there, most of the church had to be rebuilt, but up at the top, you can still say what is said to be scorch marks up there from the Great Chicago Fire. Part of the altar on the inside survived as well. If you go right into the entryway today, right inside is their old Civil War memorial that they built in the late 1860s that used to be right up on the altar. That was saved from the rubble and put on display up here in the entryway. On the right is a plaque noting that Abraham Lincoln had worshipped in this church shortly after his election in 1860, which was an unusual thing. Abraham Lincoln was not really known as a church-going guy in general. And throughout the city, you occasionally see things like this, like down at Oakwood Cemetery is the burned out rubble of a building, relic of the Great Chicago Fire. And they've just moved this from behind the Chicago History Museum, and I guess the fences that were blocking us on the Grave Robbing 101 last weekend are gone now, just a few days later. But over in these bushes is... I'll restart that one. Is the remains of a hardware store that was uncovered during construction years later after the Great Chicago Fire. Just about a block or so up is this finial. Wrong video there, I guess. This is a part of the old courthouse. Not quite as well known as the bell. But if you look on the top of the drawing up here, you can see all these little ornamentations up at the top. And one of those is now in front of the Laughlin Memorial Building on Clark Street in the south end of Lincoln Park, right near the Lincoln Park Zoo. Now, there's no plaque on there or anything. You just kind of have to know what that one is. But now you do. Chicago was rebuilt very quickly, so on the one-year anniversary of the fire, 149 years ago, the Chicago Times even almost had nice things to say. This is the Chicago Times headline from the anniversary. Good enough. This is the day we celebrate, why we all think something of ourselves, Chicago as it was, and Chicago as it is. And that is one story of the Great Chicago Fire. But as Horace White pointed out, no one can really tell the story of the Great Chicago Fire because hundreds of thousands of people experienced it. No one person can tell the story any more than one person could tell the story of, say, the Battle of Gettysburg is the example that he used. Everybody had a story. Everybody's story was equally valid. Unfortunately, not too many people wrote them down, but quite a number of people did. And a lot of it, you see the same story over and over. Everybody grabbing what they could, and everybody doing what they could to help everybody else. With some notable exceptions. So, all right, everybody. Sunday, we will be doing Graceland Cemetery. Those are going to be in-person tours for the weekend at 10 o'clock and 1 o'clock. They'll be repeated on October 17th. We are doing Graceland Cemetery at 10 and 1 every Sunday in October. And next Saturday, the 16th, we're also doing Rose Hill Cemetery and H.H. Holmes' The Devil Downtown, which will pair well with next Thursday's virtual tour, which will be H.H. Holmes' The True History of the White City Devil. I'm breaking out a lot of the greatest hits for October. If you want October tickets, MysteriousChicago.com has all of the links. I think they're all fixed now. And of course, tomorrow night we will be doing Whiskey and a Cookie on the Patty Vasquez Show Facebook page. That's where Patty and friends, including myself, eat cookies, drink whiskey, and discuss the events of the week. I might be a little late for that one. I am going to be on the road for Mandy Cripp's wedding, but that also means I'll be in a position to go to a cemetery I've never been to before for Find a Grave Friday tomorrow morning. For those of you new here, every Friday for our virtual tour, and we do virtual tours here on the Facebook every morning at 10, on Fridays it's Find a Grave Friday. I go to a cemetery where I know a certain person is buried, but I don't look up where exactly the grave is or what it looks like. We figure that out in the comments and find it together. It's all kinds of fun. So lots of great stuff coming up here as always. It's October, no rest for the wicked. Should you need a Mysterious Chicago sweatshirt, hoodie, etc., CafePress.com has you covered. CafePress.com/MysteriousChicago will get you what you need for these upcoming, please be upcoming, cooler months than we've had so far. And with that, everybody, I will put the Benny Goodman on, and we will just hang out like we always do. Thanks a lot for joining me. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago. Thanks, everybody. I've only made people drink Malort on your grave once, George. Thanks, Jessica. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Crit. You want to read more about the fire? There's a great book that you can find on Google Books called Reminiscences of Chicago During the Great Fire.
Chicago. And now Benny Goodman's arrangement of The Bugle Call Rang.
That's what I like to do the best, is find the first-hand accounts more than anything else. Semper Fi, Gary. Come on, Chicago, like my friend. Oh yeah, Robert Lorzel's article was excellent as well. Robert always does good articles. He did one of the peer review reports for the Graceland Cemetery book, you know. PJ, yes I am. The Haunted Lincoln Park tours start on Tuesday. Go to the Lincoln Park Zoo's event page and they'll give you all the information. Thanks for everybody kicking in donations. Appreciate it tremendously. It's been fairly cool out the last couple of days. It's been raining today. It was nice out. I finally found the Halloween decorations I was going to show off for the mini tour today. Me and Sven Gulli, I could see that. I met him once at WGN, but he wasn't Sven Gulli that night, he was just rich. Now, I think the zoo tours are all going to be in person this year. I know it's going to be hot over the weekend again. I'm really not pleased about that. Oh, yeah, I'll show you the Halloween stuff eventually. It's not going anywhere for a few weeks. Bob, Miles is great. Miles is totally back to normal now. Except that he's sleeping in the toy box again. Miles, come say hi. Ugh. Miles and his traveling by toy box. Miles, say hi to the nice people. He's had a long day of chasing Priya around. I usually do stop at Mars Cheese Castle on the way.
That would put rhythm in the feet of a wooden Indian.
No.
Benny Goodman's own arrangement. Now, the popular tune, Thanks a Million.
I would think it would not be comfortable sleeping in the toy box. I think he just likes to guard them from Priya. Gregory, yes, generally thought to have been floating embers. Or leaves were a culprit as well. Flying, burning leaves. Lambert Tree talked about burning leaves landing on the wooden plank stairs of the State Street Bridge. Priya's good too. Priya, you want to come say hi? Here, Priya. There we go. Here's little Priya. She's already getting to be big Priya now. Steven, most of them are on the videos page. I live streamed what I could. Baby Priya. She's a firecracker, this one. Priya, wake up now so you don't have to wake me up at 1 in the morning. I'll put you back, okay. She plays and plays all night. Yeah, Priya was, saw my mom would like stay. She's still kind of shy around new people.
Down Harlem Way, they're all trucking, and here's Helen Ward to tell you all about it. Trucking.
Well, I basically know who I'm looking up tomorrow from Find a Grave. Sarah, thanks. I tried to live stream as much as I could. Hopefully it'll be easier for traveling next year. Hey, did you see what they're adding to the Tribune Tower? It's the Museum of Ice Cream. It's their first new retail tenant now that they're redoing the whole tower. The Museum of Ice Cream already has a branch in New York. Let me just show you the picture that they put on their webpage at the Museum of Ice Cream. See, I love the idea of a Museum of Ice Cream, but look at this. It's terrifying, isn't it? Pastels. Nothing in that museum looks sanitary in the pictures, but still, it's a museum of ice cream. Oh, big shout out to Richard Super Premium Ice Cream in Pullman. It's kind of built into a warehouse. You kind of have to know it's there, but their ice cream is incredible. It's the exact opposite experience, visually, from the museum. Yeah, another Instagram photo op museum. The Sugar Factory is right nearby, you know. They have a sprinkle pool, which does not seem sanitary at all. But I don't think it's even stuff that you can actually eat. It's just you're supposed to pose on it for Instagram.
Goodman presents On the Alamo.
I've got a pint of Richard's pineapple vodka ice cream. Nicole, yeah, I've never missed an Only Murders. Burger at the Spot in Kenosha. I don't know quite what my whole schedule is tomorrow. I gotta get to a wedding there more than anything else. There's Mandy's getting married in the morning, afternoon. Oh yeah, they brought me out some samples at Richard's because apparently I'm an influencer now. And they invited me to come have some samples. Like, well, okay then. And we stayed for lunch and bought some ice cream. Rainbow Cone's a classic. It's hard to do ice cream badly, you know? I mean, I've had it, but I don't know how they manage it. Now, I know one time I went into OG Trattoria and they just gave me the pizza and said, here, so many people came in after your boat tours. Like, okay, I'll take a kickback. They charge me the next times, of course, but that's fine. Ooh, sugar skulls. All right.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and we stay right in the urban room of the Congress Hotel in Chicago and stand some more to...
It's got a... I've had bad pizza, but I could still finish it. It's just a relative thing. Hey, King over on Twitch. We're in the post-show hangout now. The presentation was at 8 Central. Broccoli ice cream? I'll take your word for it. I'd try it if somebody brought me out a sample spoon. I actually did one time when I was back with Weird Chicago, back at the time when they were making me drive the bus and do the tours, I gave a corporate tour for Edie's Ice Cream, and they just turned the whole thing into like a one-man ice cream focus group. Luckily, I have strong opinions about ice cream, so they got their money's worth. Chris, yes it did. You guys, Chris made me this, I happen to have it right here, this 3D printed Mysterious Miles. See this? Cool, huh? So many people gave me cool things over the course of the weekend. I'm still kind of overwhelmed. Gary, yeah, they're moving elsewhere in Georgia. Actually, I had Villa Palermo pizza tonight. A Pullman-inspired ice cream. Grease. Axle grease flavor. Roasted axle grease. Now, Kathy, they don't like winter as much as I do.
And we'll let the title speak for itself. Benny Goodman presenting Mad
Good night, Debbie. Vince is on 63rd. I'll try it sometime. Oh, yeah, that's what Pullman would be activated charcoal ice cream. I had some of that at the Wisconsin State Fair a while ago. Tasted like vanilla, but it was, like, black, and made my teeth look awful. Now, George Pullman's activated charcoal ice cream. Cost 130% of your salary. Mustard custard I might be persuaded to try. I saw a mustard soda, a bottle of mustard pop, and it's like, oh, you know what? Fuck you too. But I just felt insulted that they thought they should sell that to me. Now, one thing I will say is Pullman's ice cream, you'd probably have to pay a premium for. It would be mixed with the tears of his workers, but it would probably be really good ice cream. Have a good night, Eleanor. We had pretty good numbers tonight. I still got 425 on here. Can't really be that many people, can it? We're glad to have so many people. The numbers have been pretty low in September. They were kind of low in September last year, too. According to my records. Oh, the seltzer water I was having earlier was liquid death. Is ice milk still a thing, Richard? Or is it just something the Flanders family gets? I want wintergreen.
And here's a short encore portion of Benny Goodman's forthright invitation at the beginning of his program. Let's dance.
And of course, I believe Kenosha is home to the greatest band of all time, Whoopi Norm Edelbeck and the Dairyland Dutchmen, who helped introduce America to the Chicken Jants and had the best band name ever. Whoopi Norm Edelbeck and the Dairyland Dutchmen. You want a good band name, look at the polka bands.
We have been presenting the music of Benny Goodman and his orchestra from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel on Michigan Avenue in Chicago. This is the National Broadcasting Company.
Gotta rewind the Benny a bit. Kathy, I haven't had a Dairy Queen in a long time. I could kind of go for a dilly bar. I'm not grown up enough for the peanut butter parfait. I'm going to Mandy's wedding. I probably shouldn't be much more specific than that. But I'm going to go to the will call of the theater for my Bob Dylan tickets and pick those up early. Then I'll go someplace for a Find a Grave. Thanks, Greg. Kind of want some ice cream now, too. I haven't even cracked my pineapple vodka from Richard's yet. Hey, Priya. What are you up to? Oh yeah, did you happen to see the sign someone left at the Windsor Heights Dairy Queen where Chuck Grassley says he goes for you-know-what? Which I have to assume is something really kinky, or you just say ice cream. There was a sign left there a while ago saying for some you-know-what, called Chuck G at this number. The Stay Spooky Spy is delicious. It's very, very rich. I haven't gotten all the way through it yet. Priya, you want something to chase?
They all loved it. They all loved those bastards when they played by Benny Goodman.
Let me go find Priya something to chase.
Rosetta.
Probably just saw her dart through there. We used to stop at the Purple Cow in Iowa when I was a kid. The Purple Cow ice cream. Which actually is a brand. You can get it at like Meijer. Well, these guys sure scream for ice cream. Cherry Starkiss bars. That sounds good. She's awake now. Purple door. Noted. Norris, it is Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Central. And also, if you go to MysteriousChicago.com, that always listed as well. Oh, I co-wrote a whole song about slushies. Several of them, actually. Back in middle school. With my band that still occasionally records. If today was the first day since June I didn't get 10,000 steps. It's been raining. I knew I was going to break the streak pretty soon. So I'm still kind of tired from Mystericon.
Goodman's arrangement of the bugle call rang.
Scott, I drive by chocolate shop all the time. I never had a chance to go in. Actually, you guys want to hear the Slushy song? I'll pause the Benny. We'll do the Slushy song. Alright, I'm going to pause the Benny for a minute. I'm going to play you guys the Slushy song, written by my middle school band, more than 25 years ago. We still record occasionally, though. Our last song was in 2019. It was a skating rink instructional dance number called Do the Shit Fuck Hell Ass Damn. It tells you what kind of band we were. Cherry, banana, apple, orange, grape, kiwi, bubblegum, passion fruit, bubblegum, blueberry, pineapple. All these slushies in front of me. So many slushies it hurts to be. All these slushies for me to see. Tomato, raspberry, strawberry, and corn. Avocado, spinach, radish, multi-veggie, cucumber. How many slushies can there be? Slushies in my dookie. Slushies for Wilford Brimley. Cheddar, American Swiss, Monterey Jack, Gouda, Gatum, Colby Brick mustard, slushies throughout the country, slushies in Germany, give me slushies immediately, pork, beef, spam, calamari, ham, chicken, cod, liver, veal, sloppy Joe, we make slushies continuously, slushies are a delicacy, slushies are as cheap as can be. Marijuana, crack cocaine, speed, heroin, weed, LSD, angel dust, PCP, acid. Slushies cost only a penny. Slushies on a horsey. Slushies are heavenly. Wild boar, kilted yak, plaid sloth, mystic beaver, endangered owl, rare sea lion, dino DNA, magic puppy, crazy kitten, psycho antelope with a limb. Slushies have vitamin B. Slushies are good for me. We make slushies constantly. Aliens drink slushies universally. Slushies make the world go roundy. You can buy slushies for a penny. This song is about slushies. Timeless classic. Sorry I gotta put Benny Goodman back on now after you just heard that masterpiece. Shout out to Tanner Strudzenberg, my co-author there. He wrote most of that, honestly. And that's how we spent our algebra class in 8th grade. Okay, I gotta scroll back and see what my mother said about that. And I'm not doing severe thunderstorm warning. That was with a whole different band. I tried to record the severe thunderstorm warning song, but it changes key and meter about every third line. So it's awfully different. Every third word. Now, I remember in home economics we watched the Karen Carpenter story. And then listened to the Carpenters. We're drinking bourbon, which is not a... which you can actually probably get bourbon slushies now. Yeah, we kind of run out of rhymes for slushies there. Well, Marcia, kids of my generation grew up knowing a lot about drugs because it was half of what they talked about in school.
And that would put rhythm in the feet of a wooden Indian. That was the bugle call rag, Benny Goodman's own arrangement. Now, the popular tune, Thanks a Million.
I can do the Pee Wee Herman dance. There's one I haven't done on a grave yet. I only did the DARE program for a year, and the cop who was teaching our DARE class got caught selling crack one grim New Year's morn. But we had like drug units all through elementary school. Like every quarter there was some. Every year there was some quarter where we spent the whole time talking about drugs. This was the Just Say No era. Every Saturday morning cartoon commercial break had some song. No, you get the right to say no. They kind of let off a little bit in middle school. Drugs, we got nothing but drugs in elementary school. Middle school, it was all about AIDS. I actually did multiple parodies of the This Is Your Brain on Drugs. When I did the book, I Kissed a Zombie, and I liked it. I did one like, okay, this is your brain, and put it in a frying pan. This is your brain on zombies. Of course. We did one with Claudia Gray, who now is best known for writing Star Wars books. At the time, she was writing a popular vampire series called the Evernight series. We did one where a friend was like, where she was playing a friend's mom, I was like, in your room I found a cape? Who did you want to be a vampire? Who did you learn this from? From you, Mom, all right. Parents who want to be vampires have children who want to be vampires. Aiden's doing fine in school. But yeah, you know what? After all that stuff about learning to be paranoid that everybody you met was going to offer you drugs, one day I go to a Grateful Dead concert and the guy selling me a Jerry roll says, "You want my special homemade duck sauce with that? It's highly recommended." And after all my drug education, I'm like, yeah, sure, that sounds good. Kind of swam the rest of the way to the concert. Yeah, Kathy, we didn't have duck and cover by then. No, though our drug education was probably roughly as useful as duck and cover. See, Audrey? Hey, Priya, what did you find to play with over there? Good kitty. So I remember my 9th grade history teacher said, really what you can do in the event of a nuclear attack is bend over, put your head between your legs, and kiss your ass goodbye. Oh yeah, that's my standard drug dealer influencing little children voice. Hey kid, you want to be cool, don't you? You want to see a dead body? Yeah, oh, they've already started spreading out the warnings, like, remember, watch out, your kids could be getting candy that looks like this for trick or treat. Like, this costs way more than any trick or treat candy I ever got.
Benny Goodman presents On the Alamo.
Like, you find a house that is giving those out for free, you tell me. Norris, I am drinking Jepson's Bourbon Z21 single barrel, which is not as good as the Z31, but it's pretty good. It's a little bit spicier, kind of an apple butter flavor. Have a good night, Teresa. What'd you find in there, Priya? Miles, you want to do some playing? Well, the minute I get this thing out. When you lack in professionalism, you make up for it in passion. Miles, what? I got a couple of dangly toys that are just for Miles. But I only play with them when we can get Priya safe roomed. Yeah, full-size Snickers would be like the word would spread around the whole neighborhood. There would be legends told for days. Yeah, so like a $30 bag of gummies? Come on. This is back when full-size candy bars cost 50 cents. Sometimes you could get them 3 for $1 at Fairway. That was rare, but it happened. Cats are very busy right here. Priya, huh? Miles' turn. Priya has got a lot of kitten energy.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and we stay right in the urban room of the Congress Hotel in Chicago and stand some more to Benny Goodman and his orchestra and hear Helen Ward sing Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
You know the thing about cats always landing on their feet? It doesn't apply to Priya. Now, Miles, when I went to that shopping center defined by Howard Vander and Shaw, where the signal was terrible, I got Miles this dangly toy. It's a dangling mouse under the wire so thin you can't really see the wire. And he'll grab it in his mouth and, like, walk me. He'll, like, run with it. I have to, like, run as fast as I can following him. Alright, so do I have enough energy to stay up late and watch Muppet Haunted Mansion, which will probably hit Disney Plus at 11? Probably not. I'll probably have to watch that tomorrow. Time of day. Tom, yeah, I would go through an absurd amount of effort to get in good with those people. Considering the payoff was a 50-cent item. Jordana, officially it's tomorrow, but it'll probably hit Disney Plus at 11. Would be my guess. Priya, here. Want to chase something? There you go. I always try to stay up till 11 to see what songs are on the Spotify release radar. I know this week there's a new Mitski song. Yeah. Stay here so you guys get a good view of Priya over there. Good night, Christy. Marie, I will. Did you see her parkour off of the couch there? Good night, Kristen. Alright, it's probably time that I wrapped up. So I'll do a quick plug for the other upcoming events. So there's still some space, especially on the 10 o'clock this Saturday at Graceland Cemetery. We got some, I got some friends coming on 1 p.m. I know Lindsay Curry, who wrote Scratch, is, I think, coming on the 1 p.m. I think it's the 1 p.m. Then next week, Rose Hill Cemetery on Saturday, followed by H.H. Holmes' The Devil Downtown in the evening. Next virtual tour will tie right into that. H.H. Holmes, The True History of the White City Devil. It's October. We break out the greatest hits for October. But everybody, thanks a lot for joining me today. There's a lot of great stuff coming up. It's October. I don't really have a day off in October at all. But it's been great. I'm still catching up on sleep from Mystericon. But I'm going to get there, and it was totally worth it. Thanks so much for everybody who came out to that and everybody who worked so hard to make it such a great success. I'm still kind of processing everything that happened, honestly. But everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. So until tomorrow morning with a special edition out of town of Find a Grave Friday, I'm Adam Seltzer from Mysterious Chicago Tour saying stay safe, stay strong, and if you can, stay spooky, everybody. Have a great night.